the war in Vietnam. You oppose it on moral and ideological grounds as aggressive and imperialist.
Yes.
Now, so my question is, you really believed that? You thought that the United States was the United States was the offending party?
I would affirm it now. In fact, with greater knowledge and infinitely larger depth of evidence to draw upon, yes.
That the Chinese, the Soviets supplying the North Vietnamese were the good guys in this one?
I think the hardest thing probably to get people to remember now, even though they must remember it at the time, or should, is that the official reason given for intervention in Vietnam, well, there were several, and they kept changing, but one of them was that it was to stop Chinese expansionism into the Indo-Chinese peninsula. That's now considered so ridiculous, and it's so self-evidently untrue, that it's hard to remember that that was one of the official alibis.
Are you saying that it was untrue and known to be untrue at the time?
Well, whether or not Mr. Rusk, say, believed that a South Vietnamese post-French colonial buffer state, guaranteed and underwritten by the US, was an insurance against Chinese expansionism or not, I don't know. But I do know that that's what he maintained. It seems fantastic, doesn't it?
But the godfather of that impulse was containment. The doctrine of containment had been around since 1945, 46. Czechoslovakia had provoked a reinvigoration of it, i.e. they must go no further. And behind that impulse is, to be sure, a perfectly raw colonialism, which is everywhere displayed, but also the threat of China doing what they did in Korea 10 years earlier.
On this containment question,
yes,
as well as containment, in other words, the reaction to the Stalinization of Eastern Europe, there was also something that had been going on during and after the Second World War, namely and unnoticed because it could be assimilated under the rubric of containment or anti-communism, which was the United States becoming, without a vote or really much of a debate on the subject, the successor state to the former European empires, okay, to the British in part of the Mediterranean and the Middle East, especially after Suez in '56, to the French in Indochina, which is my main point.
You're not going to let him get away with calling us an empire,
but also to the Portuguese.
I'll flip this one to you in a moment. Go
ahead.
To
the French in and the Belgians in the Congo, to the French and Portuguese, and even in the Dutch in Indonesia. Remember the coup in Indonesia in '65. Now, the origin of what some have called the morass or quagmire in Vietnam is the decision by Eisenhower and Dulles to inherit French colonial rule in Vietnam. That's really the situation. The United States put itself in the position of being a classical colonial imperial power. I don't myself believe that they had a prayer of reversing that verdict by continuing to bomb and destroy more of Vietnam than they actually did. And remember, they covered it pretty much from end to end. I don't think we really say there wasn't enough violence used on the Vietnamese, can you?
Well,
it was suggested to President Eisenhower that we intervene to prevent Dien Bien Phu, and he said no. So in that sense, he said French colonialism has to look after itself. But looking after itself is different from being colonized by another entity, to wit, a Soviet entity, against which we were globally engaged. And it mattered enormously when looking down on the old Vietnam, it appeared that Vietnam, the North, was to be the aggressor to the South, threatening all that lay in the West, Cambodia.
What does William F. Buckley believe we should have done in Vietnam?